Um, Imagine going to the theater, right? And you are watching the most spectacular, universally beloved action movie of the
Oh,
decade.
absolutely. The kind where you're just gripping your seat.
Exactly. You're sitting there, you're cheering for the heroes, totally swept up as they fight tigers with their bare hands and defy gravity in these massive dance battles.
Throwing motorcycles around like toys.
Yes, it's this absolute adrenaline rush. But then imagine walking out of the theater and realizing, wait, I might have just spent 3 hours cheering for an authoritarian ethno-nationalist manifesto.
It's quite the cinematic hangover when you put it that way.
It really is. Because today we're taking a deep dive into the 2022 global blockbuster RRR. And, when I first watched it, I just saw this epic, incredibly fun story of 1920s anti-colonial resistance.
That's how most people saw it, yeah.
Okay. Right. But our mission today is to completely dismantle that surface level experience. We are unpacking a genuinely staggering essay by Alyssa A. Aminola, and it's titled RRR 2022 as Hindu Nationalist Mirror. And if you're listening to this, I promise you, you will never see those explosions the same way again.
You really won't. And as someone who spends a lot of time buried in post-colonial film studies, I'm just thrilled we are digging into this text. My goal today is to help you look past the incredible special effects and the sheer spectacle and expose the political machinery that Imona argues is operating underneath every single frame.
Yes, the invisible machinery.
Exactly. But before we get into the mechanics of that, I need to make a very clear, very necessary disclaimer.
Absolutely. Let's set the ground rules here.
Right, because Manola's essay touches on highly charged, highly sensitive, modern political topics in India. We're talking about the BJP, Hindu nationalism, and ongoing religious and social tensions. So I want to be explicitly clear to you listening. Today's deep dive is a strictly impartial academic exploration of the author's arguments.
Right, we're just analyzing the text.
Correct. We are not taking political sides, and we are not endorsing any viewpoints. We are simply putting on our scholar hats to analyze the film theory and the arguments exactly as they're presented in the source text.
Perfectly stated. We are literally just here to examine the architecture of the argument. And that argument starts with a premise that I actually struggle with a bit.
Oh.
Yeah, the essay asks how a movie supposedly about the 1920s struggle against the British could actually be about the year 2022. And wait, let me back up, because my initial reaction to this was, isn't it possible the director just chose the 1920s because it makes for great dramatic action? Does everything have to be a secret code for modern politics?
It's a really fair question, it is. But Aminola answers it using a concept by the scholar Robert Rosenstone called historical displacement.
Historical displacement, okay.
Right. What's fascinating here is that Rosenstone argues filmmakers frequently take contemporary crises, things that are too controversial or too volatile to confront directly in the present, and they displace them into the distant past.
Oh, okay. So it's like when Arthur Miller wrote The Crucible. He said it during the Salem witch trials in the 1600s, but everyone in the theater knew he was actually talking about 1950s McCarthyism and the Red Scare.
That is a brilliant analogy, yes.
Yeah.
The 1920s setting of RRR is essentially a Trojan horse. To see the McCarthyism in this scenario, you have to look at the timeline of the film's production.
The real-world timeline.
Exactly.
Yeah.
RRR was announced in 2018, filmed between 2018 and 2021, and released in 2022. That entire window aligns perfectly with Prime Minister Narendra Modi's second term.
Right.
And it was a period of rapid acceleration for the BJP's Hindutva, or Hindu nationalist, agenda.
And the essay goes out of its way to explain exactly what was happening in the real world while the cameras were rolling, right? Because it wasn't just vague political shifts, it was massive legislative action.
It really was. While they were shooting a movie about historical liberation, real-world India was undergoing massive contractions of civil liberties. In 2019, you had the revocation of Article 370.
Which was huge.
Huge. This stripped the Muslim-majority region of Kashmir of its special autonomous status, which was immediately followed by a brutal military lockdown and the longest internet shutdown ever implemented in a democracy.
Meaning millions of people literally could not communicate with the outside world while this movie was in production. That's...
Oh, precisely. Then you had the passing of the Citizenship Amendment Act, or the CAA. This explicitly offered a fast track to citizenship for certain religious minorities from neighboring countries, but deliberately excluded Muslims.
Right.
You also saw the aggressive enforcement of love jihad laws, which effectively criminalize interfaith relationships. Aminullah's point is that you just cannot divorce a film about national identity from the fact that the nation's actual identity was being aggressively legally redefined to exclude Muslims during its creation.
The essay also points out a localized political mirror, too, right? In 2014, the state of Andhra Pradesh was divided into two separate states, Andhra Pradesh and Telangana.
Yes.
And the two main characters in the film, Raju and Bheem, historically belonged to those two newly divided territories. So the movie is like trying to mythologically stitch back together a regional split while projecting this massive Hindu nationalist narrative.
Exactly. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the entire historical setting is just the costume the film is wearing to process 2022 anxieties.
Well, that makes the subtext feel suddenly incredibly urgent. Because if the whole movie is a modern allegory, then the two heroes, Raju and Bheem, aren't just guys fighting the British. They are walking, talking symbols for different factions of modern India.
They absolutely are.
So let's really zoom in on how the essay breaks down Raju first.
Let's do it. Raju is the police officer working for the British colonial state. And Amanullah analyzes Raju through the lens of the philosopher Frantz Fanon, specifically Fanon's concept of the zone of non-being.
Okay, what exactly makes it a zone of non-being?
Well, because Raju is a colonized subject
Yeah.
who is actively policing his own people on behalf of the British, he is trapped in this psychic hell. He isn't fully human to the British, and he is a traitor to his own people.
Oh, wow.
So in the zone, his only choices are total brutal compliance with his oppressors or death.
And his backstory completely reflects that brutality. The essay calls his origin story an Oedipal sacrifice. And, normally when I hear Oedipal, I think of Freud and Greek tragedy. But here, the essay means it politically, right?
Yes. In this political theology, the old paternal order must be violently destroyed so the new nation can be born. Raju's father literally acts as ammunition.
It's so intense.
He blows himself up like a bomb to kill British soldiers, and young Raju is the one who has to pull the trigger.
Which is incredibly traumatizing, and it totally explains why Raju's entire life after that revolves around one thing, which is rifles. But the essay uses the word phallocentric to describe the film's obsession with firearms. Can we unpack why a gun isn't just a gun in this context?
So, in Aminullah's reading, the rifle represents a very specific kind of patriarchal power structure. The Hindu nationalist project relies heavily on the image of the muscular, armed, hypermasculine defender of the faith.
Okay, I see.
Raju is intrinsically linked to this violence. In fact, the film explicitly codes him elementally as fire, Agni.
Right, the marketing literally pushed him as the fire guy.
Exactly. But fire isn't just a cool visual motif for the action sequences. In this political theology, fire symbolizes nationalist purification. It is a cleansing violence.
Zerifying the nation.
Right. Aminullah connects Raju's fire to the modern era, pointing out that in 2022, fire evokes very specific images of RSS marches carrying torches or vigilante mobs enforcing religious purity.
Okay, so if Raju is fire and he represents this modern, militant, upper caste Hindu nationalism, contrast that with Bheem.
Yes, let's look at Bheem.
Bheem is the leader of the Gond tribal community. The essay describes him as the pre-modern Adivasi. He's instinctive, he's ecological. Like, think about that incredible tiger fight scene right around the 22.30 mark.
Such a visceral scene.
It is, and he doesn't use bullets. He traps the tiger using herbs and indigenous knowledge passed down through generations. He is completely coded as water.
Water representing a sort of primitive, natural purity. But this raises an important question about the power dynamic between the two elements.
Right.
The film establishes a hierarchy where water needs Hindu fire for ignition. Bheem's primitive struggle is depicted as chaotic, emotional, and ultimately unfocused until Raju steps in to direct it.
And this is where I had a huge aha moment, followed immediately by a lot of discomfort. I loved this movie when I watched it, and I never noticed that. I completely missed how the narrative physically subordinates Bheem. Like, there is that critical scene where Bheem literally drops to his knees to beg Raju for help.
Just to save the little girl in the role.
Yes.
It's a striking visual when you view it politically. Bheem, this force of nature who fights tigers and unleashes wild animals on the British governor's mansion, voluntarily submits to the man representing the Hindu elite.
And later, there is that famous gravity-defying sequence where Bheem carries Raju on his shoulders as they fight together. Visually, it's amazing. Politically,
It takes on a very different meaning.
yeah, the essay argues you are watching the powerful Adivasi struggle, physically bow down, acting as a beast of burden to elevate Hindu authority.
Yes.
The film forces the tribal narrative into the caste hierarchy. It basically says to the Adivasi people, your indigenous power is only valid if it serves our upper caste nationalist structure.
That is the exact crux of Aminola's argument regarding the characters.
Hmm.
The agency of the tribal character doesn't get to stand on its own. It is contained and absorbed into the nationalist agenda.
Seeing Beam forced into that subservient role makes me rethink everything else in the frame. Like, if the characters are being co-opted for this 2022 political agenda, what about the environment around them? The essay goes into astonishing detail about literal background props participating in this displacement.
Oh yes, the physical infrastructure of colonialism. And the essay's analysis of barbed wire is just one of its most brilliant insights.
It really is.
Barbed wire is fundamentally a technology of colonial control. A manola traces its origins back to 1874, notes its horrific use in South African concentration camps, and crucially, reminds us that it was deployed to physically partition India in 1947.
And the terrifying part is it never left.
That's the point. The essay notes that in 2022, barbed wire still partitions Kashmir. It sits on the Bangladesh border. It surrounds detention camps built for those stripped of citizenship under the CAA.
Wow.
Now look at how the film uses it. Aminola highlights 3 specific appearances, but 2 are really vital. At the 43.42 mark, barbed wire physically separates Raju and Beam, 2 sides of a coin divided by ideology.
Right.
And at the climax, after the heroes win, barbed wire physically covers the bleeding body of the British governor's wife, Mrs. Scott.
So the movie clearly sees barbed wire as a tool of oppression. It knows what it means, which is why it weaponizes it against the British oppressors at the end. But the essay argues that the film completely hides the reality that the post-colonial Indian state inherited that exact same tool and still uses it against its own marginalized people today.
Right. It recognizes the infrastructure of colonialism, but conceals its modern persistence. The movie pretends the barbed wire was defeated, when in reality it was just repurposed. And we see this exact same ideological trick played with the bullets.
Oh, the 1 pound bullet. This is such a huge motif in the movie. Governor Scott has this whole chilling monologue about how a bullet costs 1 British pound, and he calculates that the life of a brown person is worth less than that, so his soldiers shouldn't waste bullets on them.
It's disgusting.
It's calculating colonial math.
It is the ultimate expression of imperial dehumanization.
Mhm.
But what happens at the end of the film? When Raju and Peem are victorious, they adopt that exact same calculation. They repeat the 1 pound valuation back to the British.
Hold on, the essay mentions Nisha's concept of ressentiment here. Can we unpack that? Because usually that means you're so beaten down you become obsessed with your oppressor.
Right. That's a great way to put it. Ressentiment is a toxic, consuming envy. Amanola argues that the heroes don't actually reject the cruel colonial logic. They are infected by it.
They absorb it.
Yes. They don't want to dismantle the oppressive system. They just desperately want to be the ones holding the whip.
I was trying to think of an analogy for this. It's like, imagine a group of rebels overthrows a brutal dictator.
Okay.
But instead of tearing down the system and building a democracy, they just move into the dictator's palace, put on his uniforms, and start using his secret police against their own rivals. Like, you haven't created freedom, you've just inherited the colonial violence.
That is a phenomenal analogy, and it perfectly captures Eminol's critique of the film's climax.
Right.
Because at the end, Raju distributes British rifles to the Indian people.
Mm.
But these rifles have simply moved from being British property to being Hindu property. Enola points out that in the context of 2022 India, this doesn't read as a left-wing revolutionary arming of the proletariat.
No, not at all.
It mirrors the real-world militarization of the majority against minorities. The oppressive regime's tools are just changing hands.
And while the film is busy inheriting all that colonial violence, it is simultaneously working overtime to erase actual historical unity. We have to talk about the flags, because this is where the visual manipulation gets really explicit.
The visual erasure in this film is systematic. Let's look at the flag that features prominently in the early parts of the movie. It's a green, yellow, and red flag.
Right.
Historically, Amanola identifies this as the 1906 Calcutta flag, which was used heavily during the Swadeshi movement.
And for those who might not know, the Swadeshi movement was a massive anti-colonial campaign focused on economic self-reliance, boycotting British goods.
Yes, and the colors of that specific flag were highly intentional. Green represented Muslim participation, yellow represented Hindu participation, and red represented unity.
Wow.
It was a literal woven banner of Hindu-Muslim solidarity against the British Empire.
And the director obviously knows what it means because it shows up at key moments, like at the 08.50 mark, it's used by the crowd to oppose the police. At 37:50, during that incredible sequence where they rescue the boy from the train crash, A woman uses that specific flag to shield Beam from the fire.
It is literally protecting the heroes,
But then it just vanishes.
deliberately so.
Hmm.
During the triumphant climax, when the heroes achieve their final victory, the Calcutta flag is totally absent. Amendola argues that the green of the flag representing Muslim participation cannot be allowed to coexist with the final muscular Hindu triumph.
It has to go.
It must be visually purged.
That's actually wild. It's historical revisionism hiding in plain sight. And it's not just the flag that gets purged, it's Beam's disguise. To hide in Delhi, Beam adopts a fake identity. He goes by the name Akhtar and wears a Muslim skull cap.
Which was a hugely controversial choice when the film was released,
Yeah.
drawing threats from real-world politicians. Oh, yes. But Manola points out the deep ideological contradiction here. If the modern Hindu nationalist discourse views Muslims as an internal threat or as outsiders, then Peem, dressing as a Muslim, implies something very specific.
What does it imply?
It implies that Muslim identity is just a costume hiding real Hindu or tribal resistance.
Oh, man. And how does the movie resolve that? When it's time for the final battle, Peem literally rips the skull cap off. The essay compares it to shedding a snakeskin. He physically throws off the Muslim identity to reveal his true, authentic self.
And that cinematic choice acts as an act of profound historical erasure. Because what is being discarded with that skull cap, Aminola reminds us of the long documented history of actual Muslim anti-colonial resistance.
Right.
From the 1857 rebellion all the way through the Khilafat movement, which was a massive pan-Islamic anti-imperialist campaign that actually aligned with Gandhi's non-cooperation movement.
The movie acknowledges Muslim political power for exactly 1 second. There's a line at 17.27 where they mention the local Nawab saying, "He sent a man." But the Nawab is a structural absence.
We never see him.
Muslim cooperation is completely written out of the narrative. The costume design is actively rewriting who gets to be considered a legitimate freedom fighter in the eyes of the modern state.
Which leads us to the ultimate act of rewriting in the film, the closing credits sequence.
Oh man, the song and dance at the end,
Yeah.
it is incredibly catchy, it's triumphant, everyone is smiling, and the essay argues it is straight up political propaganda.
Aminullah calls it a political manifesto. It is not historical fiction. It is a curated pantheon designed to build a timeline that is perfectly compatible with the modern BJP.
Okay, let's break down who actually gets a salute in this dance, and more importantly, who gets snubbed, because it is telling.
It really is. So the heroes they choose to salute include Subhash Chandra Bose, who represents the muscular militant nationalism that the modern right wing heavily favors.
Okay.
They salute Vallabhbhai Patel, the Iron Man known for using state power for unification. They salute Shivaji, the pre-colonial king, heavily iconized by Hindu nationalists. And they salute Bhagat Singh.
Wait, let me stop you there, because the essay makes a huge point about Bhagat Singh. He was a real revolutionary. But the essay says the movie sanitizes him. Why?
Because the historical Bhagat Singh was a staunch atheist and a committed Marxist socialist.
Ah.
And those ideologies are completely incompatible with Hindutva. So the film keeps his martyrdom and his aesthetic of violent resistance, but completely strips away his actual political beliefs. They hollow him out to make him fit the mold.
And then there are the omissions. Who is noticeably absent from this ultimate tribute to Indian independence?
The absences speak louder than the inclusions. Mahatma Gandhi is erased, largely because modern Hindutva ideology strongly disapproves of his nonviolence and his lifelong efforts toward Hindu-Muslim unity.
Wow.
Jawaharlal Nehru, the architect of the secular state, is erased. B.R. Ambedkar, the absolute icon of Dalit rights and the annihilation of caste, is nowhere to be seen. And naturally, every single Muslim resistance figure is omitted.
So the audience watching in 2022, tapping their feet to the music and feeling this huge surge of patriotic pride, they aren't actually commemorating historical reality. They are participating in an allegiance ritual to a modern political project.
That is the synthesis of Aminullah's entire critique. The film is molding its audience.
Okay, so if we take all of this, the displacement, the barbed wire, the erased flags, the curated history, where does the author ultimately land? Like, what is the movie's biggest blind spot?
The ultimate blind spot, according to the essay, is that the film cannot see or refuses to see that the post-colonial state is a direct continuation of the colonial state.
Meaning the system didn't break, it just changed management.
Exactly. The heroes might burn down the British governor's mansion, but the colonialist logic persists. The British Indian Civil Service simply became the Indian Administrative Service. The colonial economy morphed into a neo-colonial economy that still extracts resources from the marginalized.
Which makes Beam's entire character arc so incredibly tragic. Because the real historical Kamaram Beam, the man the character is based on, wasn't fighting for a centralized Hindu nation. The essay points out his actual historical slogan was Yal Jangal Zameen, water, forest, land.
Yes. His struggle was about Adivasi communism. It was about indigenous people having autonomy over their own resources. The film takes that indigenous knowledge, spectacularizes it for digital entertainment, and then leaves the actual Gone people structurally voiceless.
Just erased.
Their real-world demand for land and water is suppressed, completely co-opted by the nationalist narrative.
It's honestly devastating when you lay it all out. Aminullah's essay takes this piece of incredibly fun pop culture and transforms it into a stark warning. The author uses this term, historical narcomania.
Such a powerful phrase.
And I love that phrase because it perfectly describes how the movie functions. It's a narcotic. It dazzles your eyes with explosions and dancing so that your brain stops asking critical questions about the contemporary violence happening right outside the theater.
It feeds you a myth of the past to numb you to the reality of the present.
Well, I can safely say I will never watch an action movie without checking the background for barbed wire or questioning the political math of the hero's weapons ever again.
Nor should you. And if I can leave you, the listener, with a final thought to mull over as we wrap up this deep dive, if a movie feels like an exhilarating, unapologetic ride to freedom, but the mechanics underneath are built on exclusion, barred colonial violence, and erased histories, what exactly are you buying a ticket for? Next time you sit down to watch a historical blockbuster and the music swells and the heroes strike a pose, ask yourself, whose history are they actually asking you to salute?